Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. And today, we're being joined by Lynne Golodner, author of The Flavors of Faith. Lynne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, definitely.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, I would say to write with abandon. You can always edit later, but you need to write because you have to. So you write without concern for publishing or for what anybody's going to think. You just get those words on the page.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
You know, it's interesting because I have 8 books that have been published. I've written more, but 8 of them have been published, and I'm working on a 9th. And I think that the hardest part about getting published is the expectation that it's going to go a certain way and the judgment from other people. So when you suspend both of those and you just write for the sheer joy of sharing your message and getting your words out there, then you can look at different modes of publishing with openness. And I think that's really important because if you expect that the only way to get published is to have a major New York publisher accept your work, you're going to probably be disappointed. There's so many publishing channels, and I think that when you let go of expectations and you don't worry about what other people think, you open yourself up to way more possibility.
Yeah, you bring up a great point with that. And I was going to ask, you've published 8 books, so what were the publishing channels that you went through in that journey?
So I was really lucky because of the 8 books, only one of them did I self-publish, and that was many years ago, and it was to really represent my business at the time. And I was just doing it as a courtesy to customers. But the other 7 books were published by publishers. That said, I only got an advance for one of them, and it was all of $800, and I wasn't in it for the money. But it was really encouraging to me that there were independent publishers out there who deemed my work worthy, that they wanted to put it through their channels and put it out into the world. But they were small publishers, and so I wasn't doing it for acclaim or notoriety. I was doing it to share important stories with the world and to build a name for myself. And so with each of the books, they were different audiences, different niches, and I really did my research and looked for custom publishers or independent publishers that might be interested. And I was lucky because I chose them wisely. They were a fit, and they said yes, and it was a nice relationship.
Well, you mentioned publishers. So how many different publishers have you utilized for your 7 books that you worked with publishers on?
I would say there were 5 different publishers for those 7 books. And my 9th book coming out is the same publisher that put out my 8th book. So when I started working on this, I first went to them and said, hey, we have a relationship, we work together well, would you like first crack at this? And they are a hybrid publisher. So, you know, in days of old, because I'm a writer and I always have been, it was sort of something that you didn't respect if you paid someone to publish your work. But things have changed. And so sometimes you have to change with the times. And a hybrid publisher has a degree of vetting, and they have an eye and they know the industry. So they have to accept your work, but you are going to put something in. And I think that that is perfectly legitimate in this day and age. Now, I didn't do that for any of the other books, but they were published, you know, in different times of the past 20 years. But I didn't necessarily make any money either. It was more for the satisfaction of having my work in the world and, you know, the credibility that I had written a book. So I think you have to be open to the ever-changing publishing industry and go with it.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're preaching to the choir because my company is also a hybrid publisher. And the main thing is when you're working with hybrids, especially to have a business focus, is our main focus is obviously going to be for you to promote your business, your brand, and specifically the back end with that. And when you work with a publisher that has that business focus, it's much easier to make things a win-win. And also,
Yep.
those type of companies can help you with being very specific about the offer you can have on the book, different things that you can utilize, so you can build that for your business on the back end with the products and services. So that way, you are able to recoup your investment as soon as possible.
Yep, absolutely. It's a really smart way to go about it. And it's just the face of publishing today. So you have to be open to the different possibilities and the relationships that can carry you forward.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launches that has worked well.
So the first thing that came to mind when I thought about this was relationships, and building the right relationships to move your book forward is so important. So I'll give you a great example. When my book came out, The Flavors of Faith, Holy Bread, it was about how bread is something that all faith communities and ethnic communities have in common. There's a bread that is essential to ritual or celebration or just to community life. And we shared recipes and stories, and it was a really unique book. And so what we did to launch the book was we reached out to local bakeries and also local houses of worship and faith communities. And we asked them if they would come together to launch the book. And there's a group of women called Wisdom, the Wisdom Women, and they were women from all different faiths that meet together to promote interfaith harmony. And they decided they wanted to take this on, and so they launched my book. And they had a big event at a church, and they reached out to different bakeries and faith communities and asked to have some of the breads that were in the book at this event. And we had like 125 people come out who bought the book, who tasted the bread, who heard me read from it. And it was such a beautiful event, and it really launched the book and marketed it well and widely because we were strategic in the relationships and the people that this book would be important to. And we brought them all together, and it was one of the most successful book launches I've ever experienced.
So essentially, you're talking about a book launch party with some wonderful bread and a great community.
Absolutely. And it all came about because of relationships. And so it wasn't just, let's buy an ad, which can help, or let's just get on TV. We did all of those things. But the reason that the book was so successful in the launch was because a group of people came together and they believed in it. And we had those relationships that we had been building, that we had mutual benefit. And those relationships were key to taking the book to new heights. So relationship building is really, really important.
So with tying this together with having the event when the breads and everything, then I'm assuming you had some time that you talked about the book. You also incorporated time for a book signing. What were some of the things that you used to connect this event together?
So we did some promotions in advance. So the people who were hosting the event had flyers, and they sent email blasts out to their communities and invitations, and there was a lot of word of mouth marketing. But we also did a pretty big media campaign. So I did some TV segments, and so I was interviewed for newspapers and radio. We sent some review copies to different book reviewers and bloggers. And this was before the days of podcasts, but we would definitely include podcasts in the marketing if we were doing it today. And so all of that served to support the events that these wonderful women that we had relationships with were planning and building. And then from there, we followed up with everybody who attended the event. So they were now on our list. We sent emails to them. We looked for opportunities in their communities to bring the book and to have different smaller events so that we could continue that relationship going forward. So it had a lot of legs, and it carried us forward for quite a bit of time. It was a really nice coming together of all of these different interests, and then it was a literal launching point where we could carry forward and build on it from there.
Excellent. Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
So I'm a big fan of Ernest Hemingway, and my favorite book is Old Man and the Sea, which surprised me because I am not interested in fishing in any way, and I am not an old man. But the simple, active language was so rich that it held my attention. I couldn't put it down. I go back to it again and again, and Hemingway is known for that simple language. It's really concise, and it's just not flowery. It's not drawn out. It's so simple, and it gets that point across really well. But it's also very active, the active verbs that created a sense of presence that had me as if I were in the boat alongside that fish and in the struggle with the main character. And that's what I really loved about it.
Excellent. And then for our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
I had a really hard time with this one because there are so many really good quotes, but I think the one that I'm going to choose is from Annie Dillard, who's another favorite writer of mine. And she said, "Do not hoard what seems good for a later place in the book or for another book. Give it all, and give it now." And I really like that.
Well, Lynne, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, they can go to one of my two websites. There's yourppl.com, which is my marketing and PR company, and there's makemeaning.org, which is where the Make Meaning movement is and where my new book will be when it's done.
Well, Lynne, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.